Colby,
Jake?
we're back again. We're doing an episode two. It wasn't just a one-off. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just, this thing that we jump in and introduce the world and introduce the ideas and fall off, right? There's no fall off here. We're jumping into taking that first step, right? Which is how so many of our favorite characters and stories and all these lovely things jump in, right? We have that first episode where we're just learning about the world, learning about the people, what's the problem, what's going on, and then we got to actually do some stuff in episode two. That's where we're at. And so I think we're going to jump in here and we're going to talk about our first steps, right? And kind of how we got into this whole thing and training obviously, but then maybe we even get into some of the how did we go down the science road and competing and various things and whatever, right? We'll see where the journey takes us, right?
Yeah.
It can be unpredictable. You never know what the next arc has in store, right?
Yeah, and
So,
that's just true how, that's how all animes are. You never really know. But the thing that is consistent across the board is that first step. It's that first episode. It's, hey, something happens. It's a catalyst, whatever it might be. And now you're into it. You're growing. You have to face this challenge. And that's where the fun begins. So, yeah, I think, like you said, it'd be cool to start off and say, like, how did we get into all this? So on my side, I'll start like super early, go a little quick, and then like spend time in like where time needs to be spent. But I think the whole thing started growing up. When I was young, I was always overweight. I didn't really do any exercise. I just liked eating food and I liked playing video games. And then I got to the point where I was like, oh, like, I see the people on on TV in the NFL. These big guys, they're playing football. I'm like, I could do that if they're doing it. I'm pretty big. I could do that too. So I got that itch to do something. So I went with it, and I went to go for the tryouts. And on day one of the tryouts, they're like, "Hey, there's actually a weight limit because we don't want people squishing people because there's some little kids here." So I was like, "Oh, okay," and that hurt. Like that was like, "Oh, a little punch in the gut," and I'm like, you know what? That's my catalyst. Like, okay, I got to make a change. I want to do this. They said I can't, and that kind of makes you want to do it more because they say I can't. So now where do we go? And that's kind of where I just started, going online and just started to read stuff. I got a lot of the magazines, the Men's Fitness at the grocery store. Bodybuilding.com was like where I found most of the stuff. But that's just essentially starting to learn, hey, how should I eat? How should I exercise? What did these things look like? And kind of go from there. But I think the biggest step was, again, bodybuilding.com had so much stuff, right? They had the forums, they had people talking. And I think the thing at first, like one of my first memories of that was actually Christian Guzman on bodybuilding.com. He was one of the first like people who got like bodybuilder of the week or person of the week. And the reason why I actually was attracted to it, because he's like, in his bio, he's like, I got 999s in RuneScape. I got this. I was like, no way, this dude plays RuneScape and he looks jacked. I'm like, I could do that too. Then like, I want to lift weights. Like he's doing it, and I love RuneScape, obviously. So it's like, hey, let me start learning about it. And through that, there's the rabbit hole. It's the whole YouTube fitness. It's that OG era. It's Matt Ogus. Through Matt Ogus, it's Eric Helms, and then with Eric Helms, I started just watching the pyramid videos of him. Like, he was at AUT actually. And I was in that room. I remember being in that room, like, I know this room. This is the room you did the
that's
pyramids.
so
And I've
cool.
watched these
Yeah.
so many times. So it was like kind of a full circle thing. But yeah, watching those videos so much, it just really grasped me, right? It's like, hey, here's knowledge, here's practical application. We're using some science as some background. And here's what it means. And here's what you can actually take action and do right now. And I just really liked how that was, laid out. And I just fell in love with that idea of learning and growing and then kind of trying to get that information out for others. So it's like that whole culmination, spending some years continuing to grow and learn. And it's just like, learning more through Eric Helms. I actually found Zordos's PhD dissertation. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then through that, I was, looking more into his stuff. And I was like, hey, he knows what he's talking about. This stuff is pretty cool. It's like, I wonder if I could learn from him. Like how, I need a mentor. I need, a sensei even. So it's like reaching out and trying to figure out like, oh, like I could actually go and, do a master's program there and learn from him. So that's kind of, sending out the email saying like, hey, I like lifting weights. You're pretty cool. Please take me on, sensei. And then it's funny enough, I applied for other schools as you do, in getting into master's programs. And I got, acceptances into some, declines for other, but I never got anything back from FAU. And I was like, okay. I had other schools, reaching back again saying, hey, like, we need to know if you're coming or not, because we have, opened up the spots to other people. So I was like, give me another week. And, trying to reach out to Zordo saying like, any update? It's like, no, nothing. Turns out someone in like the admissions just forgot to hand over the paper. And then I got the email like 2 weeks before school starts saying like, hey, you got accepted. So I was like very, I want to say stubborn, but it wasn't stubborn. I was just very set on, I want Zordos to be my mentor, because, when you're selecting a mentor, it's very important to have someone that you feel like is going to give you the best opportunity to grow, to learn, to, just foster that environment for all those things that you're after. So I was very set on that from the start. And then, it led to a little bit of stress having to pack up everything and move to Florida in 2 weeks and figure all that stuff out. But hey, again, everything kind of works out for a reason, because if I didn't do that, I also wouldn't have met Eric, because that first semester I was there, first class, biomechanics, walk up to Zordos. Hey, how do I get involved? How do I make the most out of my time here? How do I learn? He's like, come to the muscle lab. And I was like, the what? What
Mm-hmm.
is that? I didn't really know what research was. So I was like I was like, hey, I don't know what that is, but I'll show up. So he's like, come to this room at this time. We got some stuff going on. Check it out. I remember going to, this is like the old center before, and trying to figure it out, like where it was. I was looking at the room. I think I have the right new room number, and I hear music blasting behind it, and it's Metallica. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this isn't science. This isn't school. So I'm like, I'm in the wrong place. I keep going around. I'm like, no, they come back to it eventually. It's like, I think this is it. Knock on the door. Joey Carzoli opens the door. Fantastic human being. He's like, oh, hey, man, what's up? I was like, this is the muscle lab. I was like, oh my God, Eleiko plates everywhere. People
Yeah.
just lifting weights, people having fun. And that's where I kind of got into the science. And I was like, this is where I need to be. This is where, so like the love for education meets application, meets everything, meets, and that's kind of, where it all started, and learning from that. And then again, like I said, that was my first semester there. Eric was doing his data collection for his PhD, and I just was able to help out with that data collection, be involved there, build a little bit more of a repertoire with him. And then I was like, oh yeah, by the way, when you go back to New Zealand, can you take me with you and then do a PhD there? And then it happened. So yeah, this kind of just all started with like, I probably should lose some weight, and then kind of just going with following my gut. At the time, it was bigger, a little bit smaller now. That's the whole thing, to lose the weight. But then now, just falling in love with the learning side of things, and now I'm a bit more focused on giving back. And like we talked about in the first episode, right? Just trying to create that community, like Zordos and Helms and Ogis and all these people did before us, and just kind of create a place where we can have these discussions. We can talk about the first step, what it looks like, how to navigate it, and give you some tips for it, and just kind of be authentic about it, saying like, hey, like, things might suck sometimes, but this is how, here's some tools that maybe will help you get around it, and kind of go from there. So yeah, that's kind of my story, and the whole lifting into the education side of things and how it all meshes into me. What
Yeah,
about you?
man. Man, well, I think there's some cool similarities, I think, like thematic similarities there. Um, and then there's some differences too, right? So like I think some of the similarities that I'll get into, sort of my experience of it, is like you you were chasing this thing that, like, it at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like this, right? It sounds like you were chasing this thing that you knew you wanted something with that. You wanted to learn more. You were curious,
Hmm.
but you didn't necessarily know exactly the path, right? Like you were just
Yeah.
kind of following this thing that felt right, and I'm figuring it out along the way. But you were like, I know these people that I can put myself around, that I trust them to help me figure this thing out.
Hmm.
And I very much relate to that. I really relate to the idea of just kind of asking a question and just like, hey, will you help me, or how can I get a lot out of this? How can I do this? Can I whatever? And I think that's very underrated, right? People, I say this in the class that I teach in my PhD program. I have a lecture at the end that's all about, like, where do we go from here, right? The class is all about programming and coaching and periodization and all that kind of stuff, right? But at the end, there's a lecture that's like, how do you get into grad school? How do you decide, how do I kind of figure out roughly what direction to head in? I don't have the answers, right? But this is just what I found to be helpful. And what I always say in there that still always rings true to me is like, man, you would be shocked what people will let you do if you just ask them. It's crazy, right? Because a lot of these people are like us, right? They love this thing. They're excited. They want to share it. They want to pay it forward. And they don't know that you want it unless you ask for it, right? No one can read your mind. So I just think that's cool, right? I think we've had a very similar energy behind our paths, even if they were similar but slightly different, right? So, but anyway, how I started, um, I don't remember having like a sports thing that got me going. I remember, I played sports my whole life. Well, not really now, but when, it's little.
Bodybuilding's a sport.
Yeah,
Fighting on it.
maybe,
Another discussion, different day.
maybe. But I remember playing sports, and I remember doing like push-ups and stuff. I was like, oh, I'll get stronger and make me a better basketball player somehow. But I remember doing some stuff like that, and I was like, yeah, this is fine. Um, but then this is gonna sound so cliche, but it is so true for me, dude. I remember it's one of my earliest memories of being in a hotel room. We were on vacation somewhere, I think, and I remember turning on the TV and Dragon Ball Z was on. And I just remember seeing these giant jack dudes, and I was like, "This looks cool. That's awesome." And I was actually scared of it initially. It was early in the show with Zarbon when he's like in his monster form,
Yeah.
and I remember being like, "Ugh," and I turned it off. But then I was like curious, and then I saw it come on again soon after, and I kind of watched more of it. I wasn't scared anymore, and just seeing the way that they look and like that they train and they get stronger and they're able to solve problems and help the people they care about and save the world and all this larger than life stuff. But at the end of the day, it's about self-improvement, and it's about learning about yourself and about life, and doing what you want and having, in Goku's case at least, having fun and all that. And it bit me, man, and it stuck with me. And that was a big thing. I was like, I want to look like these people. I want to do this thing. And I definitely don't look like them, but it is fun
Yet.
nonetheless. Yeah, maybe, you never know. But that was kind of it. And I just started doing, random push-ups and just whatever. You're a kid. You don't go to the gym. Well, at least I didn't. I didn't have like weights at my house or anything like that. And then going along, I start high school. Now we get into the weight room for sports. So I kind of got introduced there, and I was like, oh, like we're here, right? And that was just, I remember trying to play football. My growing up, I was always like one of the bigger kids, like one of the taller kids, one of the just wider shoulders, whatever, than a lot of the other people my age. So that was always getting recruited to play the JV football stuff or the flag football or the whatever. And I just never did. I was like, this isn't my thing. But in high school, I was finally like, all right, I'll try it. Because the high school I went to, like, they won state a couple times. Like, it was a football town. Like, I'll try it, whatever. And I was not good at all. I was so bad. But the lifting part, I was like, I like this a lot. Can I do this all the time? And anyway, so eventually I quit. I quit football before the season started. But the weight room stuck with me, and it was, I would go some periods of time without doing a ton of stuff. I would, be a little hit and miss here and there. Like you said, you got to make time to go home and play RuneScape, right? I mean, come on.
Of course, those 99s aren't going to get themselves.
No, I mean, come on. But so I was a little hit and miss, here and there, and then I didn't really fully commit until around this time. It was like October, November of 2014 that I was. The last few years before then, I was kind of progressively, worse body image, less comfortable with how I look because I just, no muscle, kind of skinny fat, whatever. And I remember asking a friend, because I was so embarrassed to go to the gym. I was like, hey, like, will you come with me and just, help me not feel so scared? And he did, and it was awesome. And then it's like, okay, I did this once. I know it's not, no one's going to bite me. It's fine. So I can just go do it. And then that's when I really got hooked, and I started like, this is pretty early on in Instagram. Like, it'd been around for a while, but this is when it started becoming like closer to what it is today. And I remember trying to find people just for inspiration, just, motivation, whatever stuff. You see people with great physiques and you want to go work out and whatever. And I remember finding some people, and I found this, randomly stumbled across this dude named Nick Cheadle, who actually put out, in hindsight, tons of great information. And one day he posted about his coach, who was named Lane Norton. I was like, oh, he must know even more than Nick does. Let me check it out. And so I checked out his YouTube and all his articles and stuff, and that actually is what led me to the bodybuilding.com stuff. It was kind of through that. And then so I dove into that stuff, and then that went into just all the network around Lane, right? So that went into Helms and 3DMJ, that went into Dr. Zordos. I remember listening to his Lane's podcast at the time with Sohee Lee, that was Physique Science Radio. That was really cool.
So good.
This early fitness podcast, man.
Yes. Yeah.
That one day they had this guest named Mike Zordos who showed up to the podcast covered in chalk because he just got done squatting. And they were I can't even remember what they were talking about, probably DUP, because that was still the thing then, right?
Yeah.
And I was just, I distinctly remember that, like, he mentioned the master's program. I was like, how cool would that be to go do my master's with him? Because I was starting to, at that point, be like, okay, you know, I kind of want to do this. I kind of want to do what these guys are doing. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but like, you know, I'm following Lane, I'm following these other people, and I found out online coaching was a thing. I found Steve Hall and went really far down the Revive Stronger rabbit hole and found so many people through him. And just seeing what these guys are doing, that they can have this as a career. And I was very lost with what I wanted to do with a career. Like I didn't have any idea. And, you know, I was like, well, maybe I can do that. So I got like a personal trainer certification, was very unimpressed with the level of knowledge that I felt that I had at the end. I'm not saying that they're all bad or anything, but just for me personally, my interest in knowing more was not fully satisfied. So I was like, okay, let me really do this. And then I know I want to do this coaching thing. How do I stand out? There's 1.5 million of them. Well, Dr. Lane Norton, Dr. Eric Helms, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, Dr. Mike Israetel, like all these, they stand out. They have PhDs. I'll go get a PhD, and then I can be an online coach, right? Like that's what my brain did. And I was like, okay, cool. 10-year plan. I'm going to go to school, get a PhD, and I'm going to do that. And it's, in hindsight, the most ridiculous, like the dumbest thing ever, but it's working out. It's all playing. Like I ended up going back to my undergrad. And at this point I was like starting to get into powerlifting, that I discovered through Dr. Zordos and like what they were doing, and Lane also at the time, and was doing that. I competed in powerlifting a handful of times, super fun. I loved it. Then, you know, it comes time to start doing master's program search. And I was like, there's one option, right? There was no other considerations. Because I was like, the reason I'm doing this is I want to learn, like what you said, like there's these certain people that I want to be my mentor. I want to do what they're doing. I want to learn from them. And so I emailed Dr. Zordos and I name dropped you, because I DM'd you before this. And I was like, man, how do I get in there? So I specifically, and he mentioned this when he finally responded to me after 5 emails, that he was like, man, if you know Colby, that like, that's a good thing, right? Like I trust you a lot more. And so that was a good way to get my foot in the door there. Got accepted, and, you know, moved from Illinois that I'd been in my entire life, came down here, immediately absolutely hated the heat and humidity, and still do, but we're here for the lab, right? And
yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing as like what you did, man. Like again, it's that parallel of like, you do what you got to do to put yourself in the position that you want to be in, that you feel will benefit you. And that's exactly what we did. And, you know, my plan was to follow exactly what you did, right? That I wanted to do that. And then I wanted to go to AUT for my PhD. And I just sort of lucked into good timing with Dr. Zordo starting his PhD program here. And so I knew that this would be very comparable in terms of the quality of mentorship and education and the kind of work that we can do and all of that. And it just meant I didn't have to do the super long flight, because I hate flying and all that. So I was like, okay, well, I'll stay here. And luckily, you know, I had the opportunity to, you know, it still applied like everybody else would, but it's, you know, when everyone at the university knows you and they all know you do good work and all that, that does help.
Yeah.
So then that's kind of how we wound up here. And man, thank God that I found out that I like research along the way, because dude, a PhD just to be an online coach is a wild choice. But you know, here we are.
It's a long game. I think that's another one that we can really dive deep into, which we'll do definitely another time. But like, I think to bring it back, before that first time you reached out to me on Instagram, we actually met through both being De Novo Nutrition
Yeah.
ambassadors.
How did I not mention that?
That's
Yeah.
how it started. So like, De Novo Nutrition, great supplement company at the time, and like we didn't know each other before that. We applied, and then you get to see like, hey, here's the team, and seeing all people, all great people, but Jake stood out. I was like, this dude's so cool. Like he also likes anime, and like the way
Yeah.
like he presents himself is really cool. So like, it was great to work alongside you, and like, we didn't really talk much then because it's like we didn't have much interaction, but it's more like follow you on Instagram, see your stuff, like it, use your discount code because obviously you gotta support the
Of
homie.
course. Likewise,
And
bro.
it's and then it's like once that kind of split, it went this other way. It's like didn't really talk much, and then it's like just still seeing your stuff and like just like ghostly keeping in contact with each other on Instagram. It's like the likes. It's like I see you, I see
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Okay.
then that's when you reached out and we had that call and discussion, and then same thing, just like for a couple like 2 years later, we had another call when he was like, hey, what's for PhD next? And it's like we
Yeah.
always had like that link, but never took it to the next step. And then the next step, which was a couple weeks ago, we had another call because it was like we're finishing our PhDs, like what happens after that? And I was like, I'm a little bit ahead of you, and I can give you some advice because like it's kind of scary, but also doesn't have to be. So kind of same thing, like, hey, like let's navigate this together in a way, even, or let me give you some tips because it's like we don't want it to be scary. And then at the end of the call, I'm like, I'm gonna say it. We should do something, and that was literally it. And you're like, yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing too.
Yep.
It was more like, yeah, we have similar values. You like anime, I like anime. I'm like, that's pretty cool. You have a Max Cape and RuneScape, and I don't, which is unfortunate, but I'm getting there. And so it's like all these things that just pointed to like, hey, like you said earlier, right? We don't know where this is gonna go, but like we need to take that first step and let's just record something. Let's just have this discussion, right? We had really cool discussions before that, but hey, let's record that and maybe we can, piece it together, maybe give some value to some other people. And I think that's kind of where we're at here. And it's like, cool. It's hey, we don't know what it is now. It's episode 2, but it's already so much fun. And I think it's,
Dude.
it's really cool. Yeah.
And it reminds me too, it's another anime trope, right? Of like, so it's fresh in my mind too, because I'm reading the One Piece manga, right? And this is not exclusive to One Piece by any means, but spoilers, One Piece has a group of pirates that are homies, right?
Those cowboys, damn
it. Yeah. Right.
Thanks,
so
Jake.
Like when you first start off, and it's like so many things are like this, that the early episodes are like gathering the group, right? Like there's a little mini adventure, and then okay, cool, we're friends now, we do our thing. And a lot of times we see those relationships kind of build pretty quickly because there's something that they have in common, right? And so like the one that pops in my head immediately is like when Luffy and Zoro met, and they were like, oh, okay, cool, like we have mutual respect, we both are kind of have some similar things, some different things also, but we're doing our thing. And they join forces, and now they're amazing. And it just makes me think about like you said, we didn't talk that much. We were, a little bit here and there, whatever. But that first Zoom call that we did, if I felt like I knew you forever, bro. Like it's like it was meant to be.
Stop. I didn't think I was gonna cry in this episode.
And then it was like 2 years later, we did it again, and it was like I felt like I talked to you yesterday, right? Like it's just it's one of those really interesting things that again, you follow what feels right and what you want and what excites you and also scares you a little bit at the same time, and put yourself in position to be surrounded by these people that you feel can help you grow and into the person that you, or at least the kind of person that you want to be. And like lo and behold, you find other similar people with the same values, and you click immediately, right? And then who knows what cool stuff can happen. And like for you got to do an awesome PhD, right, with an awesome person, and learn so much like beyond. People think that PhD is just about the research, and that's a big part of it, but there's so much, like the mentorship is so far beyond just doing the research. And like you wouldn't have got that if you hadn't just put yourself at FAU, went up to Dr. Z and was like, hey, how can I whatever, and maybe someday this podcast will be the #1 or knockoff human lab and all that, JRE, all that stuff.
Yep, 100%.
Right. But it just goes to show, man, you got to just take that first step.
Yeah.
Bring it back together.
Yeah, there you go.
Put yourself in that position.
Look at that.
You never know who you're going to meet, what cool stuff you're going to do, what adventures you're going to take. All that. Power of friendship.
100%. And like to bring it to more like training specific too, you were kind of like you said, you ended up first training with someone else, and that's kind of how it happened to me too. So like when I remember it was my birthday, and for my birthday gift, I was like, I think this was like 2012, maybe 2013. It was like my senior year of high school. Because beforehand, I was like just doing push-ups in my basement, kind of similar to you. Because I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to the gym. I'm afraid. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what people are gonna say. I was self conscious as well. So it's like that's scary. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna sign up for the gym, and I signed up on my birthday, which is earlier in the year, in April. I didn't go to the gym till like November. I signed up and I paid for it,
Yeah.
but I couldn't get over that fear. It was just like I don't know. I'd rather just do some push-ups at home and not have to worry about what happens. But similar to you, one of my friends. All right, so this is the third time I'm going to reference RuneScape. I'm sorry, but it just happens. It really does. So I met a friend. So this is someone I played soccer with, and I, cordial with them and see them throughout high school and all that. But then it's like my mom had referenced something to their mom during practice of like, oh yeah, Colby's just been cutting trees in RuneScape a lot, and and I was like, and then they told their kid, and the kid comes like, you play RuneScape, and I was like, oh no, because in high school you don't want people to know that. You're like, oh
Right.
no, and I was like, yeah, I'm trying to get 9 on wood cutting. He's like, dude, that's sick, and I was like,
Yeah.
really? And then playing RuneScape with them, and they're like, oh, I got to go to the gym, and I was like, can you please take me with you? Like, you don't have to like just like kind of just have someone to be with because like I'm afraid to go, and they're like, yeah, yeah, sure, like it's easy, it's nothing to worry about. And then like day one, I was like, okay, there was nothing to be afraid of. It really wasn't, and it's like, and then you fell in love, and then that's when everything else happens. But like, w- w- what are some tips you have for kind of navigating that fear? Because it's gonna happen, and a lot of times, everyone that first step seems like it's the absolute hardest until it isn't, until
Right.
months down the line you're like, that was the easiest step, and then you have this new hard step to kind of go. And then kind of bring it back to anime too, that's always the thing. You're facing these walls, you grow, you have progressive overload, you have the period, same thing with training. You have to
Yep.
adapt and grow and learn until you face a new wall, until you face a new challenge. So like how do you typically navigate that, or how would you suggest people navigating that?
It's man, that's a tough one. I think different people, just based on their psychology, is different, right? Like, for me, and I'm not necessarily recommending this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I know what I did because I have gone in waves with the level of just like baseline anxiety that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? That at times it's pretty bad, at other times it's not bad at all, right? It kind of fluctuates. At the time, I was very anxious of being in public, trying to do this thing, because I was just embarrassed, right? Like of especially like to bench, do things like that, because that's always the first, when we're in high school, it's everyone's like, how much you bench, dude? Like no one these days, people care about squats and stuff like that, right? It's just like now playing RuneScape is cool. It wasn't cool then. Just like squats weren't
160,000
cool
people
then.
playing, by the way, all-time peak high last week. So I heard. But yeah,
Really, that's actually really
it
cool.
really was. It was cool.
That's awesome. The fact that that game has been around and is still crushing it for this long is crazy.
The long game, man. Playing the long game, like I
Long
said.
game. But so I remember what I did is I went to the gym and I would like just chill on the elliptical or the treadmill or something, whatever. But I went it every day at different times for a while just to scope out when is it the least busy
Mm.
and like when is no one else benching and when is whatever. And I would organize what I did around that. So I remember, I think it was like Sunday mornings at like 9 or 10 in the a.m. is when I would go in and do my chest day, right? Because I was like, no one's around to see me do this because I can't. I'm doing like 65 pounds or something, right? Like I can't do anything, and it was just embarrassing. So I sort of did what I had to do to not be around a bunch of people. I do think in hindsight, I would have benefited from just having a friend there with me a little bit more.
Mm.
I got self-conscious about always asking for help, right? So um, the having somebody there with me more so that I could just more quickly be exposed to being around more people and more quickly realize nobody cares at all what you're doing. No one's paying attention. You just, everyone's doing their own thing. So I think learning that lesson sooner would have been beneficial. So I wouldn't necessarily do what I did unless that's like, if you hear that and you're just like, that's the only way I will go. There you go. I mean, it's an option, right? I don't know if it's the best option, but it is an option. But I think in general, that's the structure I think about, is that like what it's so simple and self-explanatory, but it really is that simple sometimes, right? Like just what can you do, right? Is it go when the gym's empty? Is it just be on the treadmill for a little bit? Is it whatever? Is it have a friend with you? And then, like you said, progressive overload, right? That's not just adding load to the bar or doing reps or whatever. It's like, okay, what's the next step that's a little scarier, but like, it's closer to what you want to do, and then do that. That feel okay? Cool. Let's try one more step, right? And you can pace it out however you want. But I really think that, as simple as it is, man, just doing something that's manageable and slowly pushing yourself to get just a little bit more outside that comfort zone, a little bit more outside the comfort zone. And what happens is you don't leave the comfort zone and your way out here. Your comfort zone expands along with you, right? And then it's kind of just like right there, and then you're good and you're chilling and you can just be doing your thing, right?
Yeah, that was so well said. I really like that analogy, like the comfort zone, because that's something that people can relate to in some regard, right? Any comfort zone, but it's like I said, yeah, we need to challenge yourself, and I think it's like you talked about. Honestly, just making that barrier to entry so low is the way to go. Like, what's gonna start that
Mm.
momentum of taking that first step? Even if it's like I will go to the gym once this week, and I mean, like, I just need to step into the gym. Like, if I don't have to work out, like, hey, I stepped in the gym. I realized, like, okay, it's not that scary. Or maybe I'm scoping
Mhm.
out when things are not as busy. And then it's from there, like you said, make it a little bit more challenging, or like try to top that. I'll step in 2 days. Or, if it's take a step further, it's like, okay, I'm going to train 2 or 3 times per week. Whatever that looks like, doesn't matter. If I can tick that box of I did it, then that's a win. And if you keep stacking those wins and make it a little bit harder each time, give it some time, and it's gonna happen. And I think that's the thing, is that people, they might think that it needs to be this like grandiose, like I need to have everything optimized, everything maximized, have this whole set plan set up. I need to follow this. I need to do this. Have this 30-minute warm up. It's like you honestly just have to show up tired, show up sad, show up happy, show up, just show up, and honestly things will happen. And it's like you take what's ever there on that day. If it's a great session, a good session, like the godfather of bodybuilding always says, you got to deposit the pennies, right? Some days you're going to deposit a nickel, it's going to be a great session. Some days it's going to be a penny, but it all adds up in the end. You might not see it right now, but it really does. And I think if people start to think about that, think a little bit more long term, it's going to be a lot easier to take that first step, because you're like, oh, well, a year from now is forever. Like, that's just going to be whatever. Sometimes might as well just do stuff now and let me enjoy it while I'm at it, because I'm going to be doing it for a while. And then all of a sudden a year passes and you're like, damn, like I'm doing it. Like, I'm in it. I'm looking pretty
Yeah.
good. I'm making some progress physically and then mentally too. So it's like, just honestly make it so easy to do. Create systems where it's like, again, you're just like increasing your chances of success as much as you can, right? And make it as easy as possible. And setting up an environment in a system that can allow for that, whatever that may look like. Of course, it's going to be very different from person to person, accounting for all the context and everything that's going on. But it's, once you structure around that and that general theme, it's going to happen. And it's, again, sometimes, like we said, it can be scary to take that first step. It can be very scary, but when you do it, you're like, hey, I did it. Take that box. Big win. A lot of times it's a very big win. And from there, what's next? So it's like,
So
yeah.
I have a follow-up question for you, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure some people are going to listen to this, and of the 5 people that are listening, but no, some people would listen, and they think that, like, dude, the lifting part is the easy part, right? It's the nutrition that's hard, or it's some other piece or whatever. And I think a lot of people have that experience, that the training part is the easy part, that's the fun part, that's the all of that. And all of those same concepts, those still apply, of making the barrier to entry low, and taking those baby steps, depositing pennies, all
Mm-hmm.
those things. So I know that I did this with nutrition. It's actually one of the one of the things in hindsight that I'm actually very proud of, the way that I did it. I feel like I did it a very good way from the get go, which is not usually how this stuff goes, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I'm curious on if you have thought about that on the nutrition side, of like, if you have things that you did, or advice that you've had in your coaching experience to your clients, or anything like that, about like how to make that process a little bit smoother.
Yeah, I think, funny enough, I think I also did that kind of well when I first started off too.
Nice.
One, because I had this very big wall saying, like, you need to, like, figure out how to eat properly because you have to lose this weight to then play the sport. And then when it came to more like lifting structured things, I had a baseline idea. But then, being on bodybuilding.com and Matt Ogus, you learn about flexible dieting super early.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, the theme of flexibility just really makes a lot of sense. It's practical. It's looking at, again, kind of themes in the overall picture of stuff and consistency, and like that 80-20 rule that's very always thrown out there for if it's your macros or flexible dieting. 80% of the time, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you'll be okay. For food specifically, if you're eating 80% of good foods in quotations, of course, like you're going to be okay. So I think from the start, again, is not having super high expectations, not reaching for perfectionism, because we're not after perfect, we're after progress, right? So it's just like, how can I reach progress? Well, let me just be aware of nutrition labels, right? Let me start reading that. Let me figure out what that means. Let me understand carbohydrates and protein and fat and like, calories per gram and what this looks like. And then from there, like because I think starting from like the super foundation, again, going back to the pyramids, building that foundation of knowledge goes a long way. Yes, it's going to take a little bit of time and effort to learn and to watch the videos, to read, whatever it might be. But especially now, there are so many resources that make it a bit easier. But of course, you still need to do that work. But doing that work now, building that foundation is really going to lay down a lot of pavement to run in the future and have more success. So I think in terms of like specifics, again, just putting in some of that knowledge and learning early on and understanding, calories, understanding what, habits are sustainable for you, right? Like, can you wake up and eat breakfast right away? Or are you like, I need to wait an hour until I can get some food in me? Or maybe I should be eating around training. So how can I structure my day around, how can I structure my food around my training day? And what does that look like? And kind of reverse back from that. So I think, again, just think about things and looking at ways that you can do stuff and see yourself doing those things in the future consistently, right? Whether it's like for the future, for the next week, for the next month, for the next year, for the next 10 years, it depends on where you're at, where your goals and stuff. But I think, again, if as long as you can build that momentum, find ways to do that and start it,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think that the knowledge is so important. Not just that, like knowing all the facts of like,
Mm.
Specifics about protein, blah, 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 whatever. Like that stuff's cool. To a degree it's helpful, but
Mm.
you reach a point relatively soon that it's like, okay, it's interesting and you might learn some little nuances that make a slight change here and there, but in terms of just gross changes in body mass, you don't need to know that much, right? But
Yeah.
also just learning about yourself and how your
Mm.
brain works and how you like, what do you latch onto? I think that is an equally important
Mm-hmm.
knowledge thing that you get. Like, for example, when I was kind of starting this, right, my first exposure to how to do nutrition for body comp was actually through the Beachbody programs, P90X and
Yeah.
Insanity. That I did those, and the diet part of it was so hyper specific.
Mm.
And it was based on your body weight. And if I remember correctly, it was based on body weight, whatever. But there was like, these are your macros. These are the meals that you can eat. You need to have them at roughly these times around your workout. Like it was very, very,
Mm.
very specific, very rigid. There was some like meal substitutions you could do. So it was kind of flexible, but like compared to how flexible dieting can be done, it was pretty rigid.
Yeah.
And I remember, I did it for a while and then I just was like, this isn't, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like, this isn't realistic for me. There's got to
Mm.
be, some other way. So, I did what, exactly what you did, right? You learn more stuff. You start looking at the pyramid videos from Eric Helms, and you start learning, stuff like that. What flexible dieting really means. It doesn't just mean macros, right?
Mm.
There's a lot more depth to it, but you learn all this stuff, and then you figure out where you naturally sit on this spectrum of flexibility and structure. Joe Klemczewski says this all the time, right? Structured flexibility. I
Mm.
love that.
Yeah.
That there's a sweet spot for everybody. It's going to look a little bit different for different people. But like for me, my natural tendency is I start learning some stuff and I'm like, okay, cool. This is kind of a good sweet spot, 80-20 rule, right? All
Mm.
that. Then I learn some little details and I'm like, oh, it's so enticing, right? I can do that. I want to do it. And I remember there was a time where I was going way down the rabbit hole of this tiny minutia that maybe makes a very slight 1% difference at the most when you're stage lean or whatever, right? That
Mm.
just didn't apply to me at all. But I was like, oh, I can do that. So I remember having, this was before I even used spreadsheets for stuff. I would pen and paper, and I would plan out everything exactly, right? Weighing every single thing and doing all this. And then I, do that for a while. I get burnt out and it doesn't work. And that's when I learn about myself, like, oh, I have this tendency towards perfectionism and towards getting really wrapped up in this exciting thing that feels like it's cutting edge, that feels like it's, an elite version of the thing, right? Feels like RuneScape 3 rather than old school. Uh, you might say the
Nice.
opposite. But no, this is the RuneScape episode. That's
I was just
hilarious.
gonna say we need to make the title just RuneScape.
Yeah. But so I get wrapped up in that stuff, and then it's too much, and it's overwhelming, and it burns me out, and then I don't get anything out of it, right? I revert back to just eating like someone who doesn't pay attention to nutrition at all. So then that process is how I learned where my sweet spot is, right? That I need to do, like normal off-season stuff. Like I'm prepping right now. I'm tracking everything. I'm weighing. I don't even weigh everything, to be honest. I weigh most things, but not everything. Um, but normal off-season stuff, I'm not tracking anything, dude. I'm paying attention to my body weight. I know from eating like this for 10 years, like I know how much protein I need. Like I know what the pile of chicken looks like on my plate or whatever, right? So you just naturally build these habits up, and you don't have to stay like that all the time. But like that's my sweet spot usually, is just kind of, paying attention to some metrics, some slight tracking type of things, and then just having fun the rest of the
Mm.
time. And then when you need to lock in and be super detail oriented, you can do that. You're not burnt out. You can flip the switch and go do it. Um, so like that's my sweet spot, right? Other people are going to be different. Some people love tracking everything and they can't let go of that control, which kind of can become problematic sometimes. It's probably good to learn how to not do it, but nonetheless, different people are different.
Mm.
And it's just that process of learning about yourself, man. Like that's such an important early step in this process of, I think it comes maybe just after learning some of those basics, right? That you learn the basics, you start to try them, you experiment, you learn about yourself. You're going to fail on some things. That's okay, right? You just get back up and try something else, right? You just keep going. No one has been, I remember Alberto Nunez saying that he didn't miss a training session for 10 years or something like that. Most people aren't like that, right? Like most of us we got, things come up, things, for various reasons, but we're not going to be perfect, as you said. We're just striving for progress, and learning about yourself helps ensure that progress, right? Because then you're not going to sabotage yourself nearly as much. So
I think right in the end when you said there is one of the biggest things is that you're going to fail. And I think you need to be okay with that. And it's not that you're failing and that's a whole bad thing. It's failure is just learning when you really look at it. It's good to fail because that means like, hey, here's an opportunity of how I can learn from that and get better so that if this thing comes up again, I don't make that same mistake. And that's where the growth comes from. So I think really embracing that idea that, you're going to have these times where it's hard, where you're going to fail, you're going to, things aren't going to click, but really diving into that and taking that time to do the learning, to do the inner work and be like, okay, like how can I, like, what's working, what's not, where can I improve, what can I go from here? So I think that's a big thing is just like, hey, it's going to take some time, and like, there's going to be progress is like this, right? It's going to be up and down, but that trend all comes towards the positive, right? It's not going to be one straight line. It's just like when you look at it like that, it's just more helpful to know like, hey, like everyone's human. We're going to make those mistakes, and it's like kind of exciting to know that because you're like, ooh, once you start really like, kind of getting that psyche and getting in that positive thinking aspect of like, okay, here's a failure. Let me reflect. Let me figure out what I can learn. And learning's fun. What's here? And then from here,
100%.
boom, next step. And again, that's what you see in anime all the time, right? It's just like, oh, they lost this battle or this fight, or they're not strong enough. Okay, what do? Training arc time. Literally, you're going back, you're going into the gym,
100%.
or you're going wherever it is you're doing the mental training, all these things. And then it's like, okay, I need to be a different version of myself to then get to where I want to be. And it's just like, that's super cool. And I think if you're really embracing that journey, something we always talk about, right? Think about the long term, have fun with it, embrace that journey. When you really sit and think what that means and like embrace that, that's when progress will come. And it's going to take some time, but like I said, we probably want to be lifting weights for the rest of our lives, right? Like
I
it's
hope
fun
so.
to do. We enjoy this stuff. And it's going to look different from time to time, this year, next year, 20 years, 30 years down the line, when you first started off, all this stuff, but you're doing it. You took that first step. You're learning. You're okay with failure. You're okay with making mistakes. Like no one's really cares. No one's looking at you, and you're like, okay, like we're all here to better ourselves in some degree. Some people maybe are a little bit earlier in their journey, some are later, but we all have that commonality of we just want to be better. And I think that's why the gym's so cool. Like everyone starts off like they have something to relate to, and it's just like nice. Like that's we're all
Yeah.
in this. We're all in this together, like that kind of thing, right? It's just like I'll spare the singing, but yeah, it's man, it's like I said. Once you take that first step, it's just you can encounter some other scary stuff, but it's you starting it and you're in it and you're like, oof, I'm in it, and
Yeah,
it's exciting.
for sure, dude. That's for my Dune fans out there. Fear is the mind killer, right? So
Mm,
fear is like that's what sabotages us. We're scared to make a mistake. We're scared to fail. We're scared to not know everything. We're scared to do something wrong and waste time or what like as you said, if we can turn it into a positive thing, turning into like a learning experience or like, oh, okay, well now I know what not to do. That's helpful, right? So I'll do this, and like trying to avoid that fear based decision making or fear based not making a decision, which is making a decision. That helps so much, man. And that's one of the things that I'm not powerlifting right now. I haven't in almost 5 years, which is weird
mm,
to think about.
yeah.
Um, I will come back to powerlifting at some point, but I don't know when. But that's one of the things that I'm so grateful to powerlifting for is teaching me that, right? About like I was so scared to miss a squat. I was so scared. And eventually you do it and it's fine. It doesn't matter. Like no one thinks that you're weak. No one's like, "Oh, that was pathetic, dude. Get out of here." Like no one there's no reason to be scared of that. You do a powerlifting meet. I was so scared of doing that I thought people would like laugh at me or just ignore me up there because I was weaker than I was. I was the first person on the platform in the
Yeah,
flight and all that. And everyone is stoked. Everyone's like,
it's
"Yeah, dude, like this is awesome. You're doing your thing."
powerlifting
And
community is so awesome in that
it's so
regard. It really
cool.
is. Like if you're not participating, just go watch it and just be there because
Yeah,
everyone is supporting everyone, and that's just the coolest thing.
it's
They do
yeah,
that really well.
it's amazing, man. And like that really in a very lifting specific context really taught me to not be afraid of failure in that way. But then like that's one of the themes of this whole podcast that we're doing, right? Is that like those lessons you learn in the gym transcend everything, right? That's how life is. And it's so cool, dude. And bodybuilding is a little bit different. I will say when it comes time to if you choose to compete in it, right, which is not for everybody by any means whatsoever, but if you choose to try to do it, which we've mentioned that I'm trying to do that right now, I'm getting a lot of that feeling again, right? Of people are so supportive. I haven't had one person be like, "Bro, you're so small. Like, what are you doing?" Like, no one has said that.
Yeah,
No one's like, "You're 9 weeks out and you have that much fat to lose still." Like, no one's done that. Everyone's just like, "Yeah, dude, let's go. This is awesome. I'm
yeah.
excited for you." It's super supportive again. So it's just I don't know. It's cool to find those communities and those just those good vibes, dude, and to reinforce those good lessons that help to build the understanding of yourself and what processes to use and what communities to keep yourself in, what people to be around, and all that, man, as we just kind of continue through this whole crazy journey that you think powerlifting is your life and then you don't powerlift at all for 5 years and you're like, yeah, I'll go back at some point, but I don't know. And
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. One thing you said there, I feel like it'd be good to touch upon too and kind of wrap up on because we're talking about taking that first step, and both of our kind of instances of that, we had someone helping us, and I think that can be very helpful. But I think it's extremely important that you don't wait for that because if you're waiting for someone to push you, or if you're waiting for a sign, whatever it is, it's you end up sometimes just never doing it, and that's the biggest mistake is not doing it. So like it'd be great if you can have that 100%, but don't. If anything, then hey, use this podcast as a way of hey, this is us pushing you, saying go do it.
We'll do it, man.
But I think if you do wait for that, it's not going to happen. So really focusing on action, focusing on doing stuff, no matter what it is, how small, whatever it is, just move forward. Forward is still forward, no matter how small of a step, big of a step, whatever it is. So like, yeah, you honestly just got to do it. And, we gave a little bit of an examples of what that might look like, and kind of put it in a broad way. But again, it's more of just starting, and things start to fall into place after that.
They
It
do.
really does. Like, it doesn't, you don't
Amazing.
need a plan. It just kind of, it
Yep.
works out, but it won't work out unless you actually take that first step.
Gotta take it, dude. And sometimes, you're gonna take that first step, and then you gotta take some sideways steps before you can go forward again. That
Mm-hmm.
happens, right? Like that happened to me with nutrition stuff. I learned some stuff, and then I was like, this isn't realistic. I need to change my food choice habits, or I need to work on my portion, whatever. Like I wasn't losing. I was trying to lose weight, right? I wasn't losing weight when I was really doing that. A lot of people will if they make those
Mm-hmm.
changes, but I wasn't at the time. But I was like, this is okay because this is going to allow me to take that next step later. I'll have habits that are allow me to be more successful, right? So
Yeah.
there's no pressure, dude. We
It's
just
really not. Like, the
there's
pressure
no
comes
pressure.
from you, and like sometimes
Yeah,
that can be helpful, yes, but a lot of times it's it's just not. You're again preventing yourself from action. So just do it. Just insert Shia LaBeouf over here. Just do it, and then it's just like that's kind of how it is. But yeah,
yeah.
I feel good about that. Like, is there anything else you want to wrap up on taking the first step or in general?
I don't know, man. I think that's all I got. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, I think
Cool.
good way to end it. Yeah, but as always, right? Thank you so much for listening, Jake. Thanks so much for the discussions. Again, always a good time. Like I said, we'll have to call this the RuneScape podcast, but hey, it was good. Okay, we learn a lot from RuneScape and anime. That's kind of what we talk about too within this whole thing, because we can
Yeah.
relate it to what we want. But yeah, as always, thank you so much for listening. We'll probably put our handles again into the down below into the little thingies, and
Yep.
then we'll just keep up to date there. So
There we go.
yeah,
Cool. Thanks,
peace.
everybody.